Hey everybody, welcome to a new edition of Naked Sports. I truly appreciate you all for being here. I always say that. Today is a solo pod, but it is an interesting pod because I have a lot of sound bites. I'm catching you all up on what's been going on over the last week. I'm going to do a synopsis. And let's just say this is called free speech because it's not free. A couple of weeks ago, we had got on this conversation when I was on CNN about is free speech under attack? And it wasn't even a couple of weeks ago, if I'm honest, it was back in June. And I remember being on the panel with the editor of the Daily Beast, and she said, no, I disagree. I feel like, free speech isn't under attack. This was after there was a few commencement addresses because it was graduation time. And Scott Pelley, who is a journalist on CBS, addressed the crowd, and he said, listen, in short, free speech is under attack. I can't talk about anybody in this current administration for fear of being sued and or losing my job. So I want to explain a couple of things before I get into the particulars, okay? Free speech, First Amendment right. It allows you to say whatever you want about whomever you want. That is a tenet. That's just the basics of that First Amendment right. We have lived in this country, as long as I've been alive, as long as you've been alive, as long as we can remember, I'll just say for the last century, people have been allowed to say whatever their hearts desire. Now, there are always repercussions. They really are. It doesn't mean that you might not get canceled, right? Free speech, if I have something to say about someone who's extremely popular, free speech means I can say it, but I could get canceled for what I am saying. And that's just the way it has been. And as of late, people are talking about free speech. And let's just make it really clear. It has never really been free. Meaning there are always going to be things you have to deal with when words come out of your mouth, i.e. Cari, if what this podcast today, I am speaking my mind, and there will be people who judge me and not like me, or perhaps say thank you for saying it. There are just things that happen when you speak your mind and have an opinion. And so there are two different thoughts here. As a journalist, as someone who has a podcast, as someone who gives opinions, one person can say, Cari, you should just put your head down. You should not be bothered with this. Do not talk about it until all of this blows over. There's another train of thought that is quite simply, actually, no, this is what I do for a living. I wish I could mind my business. I wish I didn't have something to say, but I do have something to say. And I'm not speaking as someone who is trying to save the world. I'm speaking as someone who is employed by different outlets to give an opinion, to report the facts, to make opinions, to offer new perspectives. That's what I do for a living. So I really don't have a choice. I had a good girlfriend call me the other day, and I remember, I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast, and she said, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. America's not worth it. You should just sit this one out. There's nothing wrong with that train of thought. In fact, I understood what she was trying to say. But I also said, guess what? I don't work behind the scenes. I make a living this way by talking. I don't have that choice. And it is completely fine if you decide you're sitting this one out. Do not put your fears on me. I don't want anyone to put their fears on me. I'll deal with it accordingly. But what I do know is that if all of us decided to turn the other cheek, look the other way, put our head down, we will find ourselves in a much more desperate situation than we are in right now. And what I mean by that is everybody can't sit this one out. You just can't. If we continue to let hate speech live and call it free speech without addressing it, if we continue to let other people talk about the Black and brown community without any sort of consequence, we are going to be in trouble. We are already heading to a place in which we live under this authoritarian called President Trump, and how he has decided that it is against the law, in his mind, his words, to say anything bad about him. I don't know if you guys heard about this, but if you cover the Pentagon, if you are a journalist, someone who does what I do for a living, and my assignment is the Pentagon, they have decided that any reporter that wants to have access to the Pentagon, that wants to have that information relayed to them, they must sign a pledge saying that they will not talk bad about this current administration. Why would I sign a pledge that tells me that I can't report the facts. Talking bad about what is going on with our current society isn't subjective. It is what is happening. It is a fact, right? It's a fact. And so they're saying, you know what? These facts don't matter. So that's why I say free speech has never been free. Now, the price you pay is far different from what our ancestors paid. And by our ancestors, I mean Black people. When Black people were brought over here and they were slaves and they spoke to another person who was quote unquote their owner or whatever seemed disrespectful, people would lose their lives. My grandmother, may she rest in peace, would tell stories when she was a kid. She was born in 1930. She never looked white people in the eye when she was a kid because she knew that could get her in trouble. And by trouble, that means life lost. Insane that we fast forward and we're still living in a country where now, at present day, I know there are journalists, there are Black people, there are brown people, there are women who are afraid to speak their minds, not because they will quote unquote lose their life, but perhaps their livelihood. That is where we are today. So today I thought I'd play a game, and it's not necessarily a game, but I want to play some sound bites for you. I want you to listen to where we are in society, and why free speech to me should always be available to everyone, no matter what side you are on, whether you're right or you're left, you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, black, white, purple, short, green, tall, you name it. We should all be able to say whatever we want. But what we should not do is revise history. The assassination of Charlie Kirk was disgusting. And I repeat that. The assassination of Charlie Kirk, the right-wing political activist, co-founder of Turning Point USA. His assassination was disgusting and horrible. And the reason why I feel like it was even more horrible, because it was made available. It still is available. I don't think anyone should be watching this man be assassinated in HD on TikTok and or Twitter and or you pick whatever social media outlet you want. I think that's disgusting. I hate that we live in a society like that where everything is available. You're always on camera. Everything is being recorded. There's lack of respect of life right there. It really truly is. But what we're not gonna do is change history. What we're not gonna do is pretend like what this man said wasn't provocative. We're not gonna say that he was just a good guy trying to get people to see the Lord. Perhaps that is true, but these are one of these instances where many things can be true. Many things can be true. Charlie Kirk spoke so ill of Black people, Black women more specifically. Take a listen.
If we would have said that Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously.
I'm not going to get into the affirmative action debate, whether or not people should have affirmative rights. I'm not getting into that. I already know how I feel about that. And of course, coming from me, it's going to be completely subjective. Not even like I am speaking as a Black person who thinks that we should have affirmative action for various reasons. Let's not get into that. But the way in which he talked about affirmative action and Black women and their brain processing power, highly offensive, borderline hateful. And if anybody is really, truly paying attention, it's insulting. It's insulting. He had a daily 3-hour talk show. And I'm going to be honest. I didn't listen to his talk show. That's not me. But there are many, he was very successful, many people who listened to his talk show. In fact, he specifically targeted Generation Z, right? Gen Z. That's who he was talking to because he felt like this country needed to turn around. And the way to do that is to talk to that generation. I am not of that generation, so I am not his listening audience. But what I can say is I have seen so many mixtures of videos floating around the internet where people are saying he said some really positive things. He cleaned up what he said about Black women. In fact, he said what he meant was, and he went on to explain. Take a listen.
Here's what's upsetting to me, Heather, is if I'm dealing with somebody in customer service who's a moronic Black woman, I wonder, is she there because of her excellence, or is she there because of affirmative action? It almost creates thought patterns that are not necessarily wholesome. It creates resentment, doesn't it, Heather? This is not a way to design society.
For me, it's insulting and it's hateful, but it is still free speech. And today, we're watching in real time how people are losing their jobs over commenting on Charlie Kirk. A young lady who works for the Washington Post lost her job because she was commenting on Charlie Kirk. She was doing exactly what her job asked her to do, and they fired her for it. Now, that's the only instance that I can talk about specifically that I know of that is a fact. We've heard of so many different instances on the internet. I don't know anyone personally who's lost their job, but I do know that when we talk about this, we get nervous because we're like, am I going to lose my job? Enter Jimmy Kimmel. He was pulled off the air for making a comment that to me, right, because comedy is subjective, to me was not offensive. However, they pulled him off the air for a few days. Listen to what he had to say.
It was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man. I don't think there's anything funny about it. I posted a message on Instagram on the day he was killed, sending love to his family and asking for compassion, and I meant it, and I still do.
I don't know if you all watched the monologue when Jimmy Kimmel returned. I felt like it was pitch perfect. And what I mean by pitch perfect was that he, to me, right, because it's all subjective, to me, struck a very good balance between giving his opinion, expressing remorse, not necessarily apologizing, but explaining what he was trying to say, which is he hates the fact. And he said this, as you heard, that Charlie Kirk was murdered. We all do. And I can't speak for everyone, but I mean, anyone with a heart is like, look, no, come on. That's ridiculous. No one wants to see anybody assassinated. No way. But then he also, at the very same time, thank you, Jimmy, for doing this, spoke about how important it is for us in this country, because this is the only country that we know of that allows us to do that, is have free speech. It is important for us to fight for free speech. Let me get that out. And the reason why it's important is because that is what America is built on. That's what makes this country so great. So if you do want to make America great again, you have to allow free speech. You can't say, oh, well, what you said about this podcaster is not right because he was assassinated, and therefore you get to lose your job because it's gross. It doesn't work that way. It really doesn't. There is this ideology, there is this philosophy that when George Floyd passed away, a lot of people on the left during that time were really extreme. People were losing their jobs. When it came to the Me Too movement, we saw a lot of people lose their jobs. People were getting canceled for saying things that were inappropriate. And then there were a lot of different people who felt like BLM, Black Lives Matter, incited a lot of division. And so I hear some conservatives say, this is our payback. You swung the pendulum all the way to the left during the COVID era, and now we're taking it all the way to the right. No, just no. And I'll tell you why. Because here's the difference, at least in my humble opinion. During the COVID era, during George Floyd's time, during the swinging the pendulum all the way to the left, sure, perhaps people did take it too far. Perhaps people did take it too far. I don't know. Maybe perhaps there wasn't any courtesy when calling out the right. But what wasn't happening was a president by the name of Joe Biden saying, guess what? You can't say anything bad against me because you're going to go to jail. There wasn't a president saying, you know what? This person was a great guy and I stood by everything he said, even if it was hateful. I'm paraphrasing here. And I'm not saying Joe Biden was a great president. I'm not saying that they didn't try to censor people. I do, in fact, remember Facebook felt like it was being censored. That administration asked Facebook to make sure it fact-checked some of this false information that was floating around the internet. Yes. Censoring happens. It really, truly does. But if you take a group of people and say you're going to lose your livelihood if you say something that is true out loud, then we're in a bad space. I mean, I legitimately have friends who won't talk about Charlie Kirk because they just don't know what will happen. I have a friend who works in Las Vegas at a spa, and she was told in no uncertain terms, do not talk about Charlie Kirk with anybody, good or bad. You just want to steer clear. You don't want to be in trouble. If you take fear, because that's what's happening, and you take chaos and you literally institute it in every single conversation that you're having, people are not going to feel free. People are not going to be willing to share what they think. People are going to be quiet and let horrible things happen while we stay quiet. Back to my original conversation when my friend said to me, Cari, maybe you should tap this one out. Maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should sit this one out. Maybe you shouldn't talk. I'm not saying anything crazy. I'm letting you hear what this man said, good and bad. And I don't know if there was any good, referring to Charlie Kirk. And I'm letting you decide. But what I do know is if I am offended by it, I should be able to say so. Isn't that what free speech is? Isn't that the world we live in? Common sense isn't common, and we are in trouble because we feel like we can't. We can't talk. I am not saying an eye for an eye. I'm not saying that at all. But I can tell you that Charlie Kirk did not like empathy and compassion. He talked about that. He also wasn't someone who promoted peace. So for people to lose their livelihood for pointing that out to me doesn't make sense. And then now October 14th is a day of mourning for Charlie Kirk. How is that possible? I don't believe anyone should have to mourn a person who lived their life spreading hate speech. His choice, freedom of speech, but why does that mean I have to mourn him? Why? He wouldn't mourn if I died. What happened to Melissa Hordman, the Democrat who was murdered in her house for being a Democrat, who was fighting for women's rights? Political violence is disgusting on either side. But I need to know whose life deserves appropriate mourning. Why is her life not just as valuable as Charlie Kirk's? Why are we not honoring her as well? I don't understand this. I don't understand the world we live in, and everyone's afraid to talk about it. In other free speech news, and I'm going to take a minute because I want you guys I'm going to catch you up on this. Laura Loomer, ladies and gentlemen, are you familiar with Laura Loomer? She's considered one of President Trump's closest advisors. By way of background, she's 32 years old. She's considered a far-right political activist. She, over the years, has been removed off of certain social media platforms for violating the policy on hate speech. And as of late, for whatever reasons, and this is her considering herself a pro-white nationalist, for whatever reasons, she had decided she was fed up with Jasmine Crockett. And you all know who Jasmine Crockett is. If you don't, She's in Senate. She's done a great job. She's a 44-year-old Black woman who is unapologetic in how she lives and her fights and her purpose for her fight. I think she's a rising star in the Democratic Party, if not a star. I do believe that's why people on the right attack her, because she is a rising star, because she does have a lot to say and she is really smart, and it makes people uncomfortable because she gets attention. She is able to say the uncomfortable things out loud in a beautiful way. And to me, I mean, at least to me, I feel like what she's doing is for the work of the people. But I'm going to take a few moments here and read some of the tweets that Laura Loomer sent out about Jasmine Crockett. The reason why she sent out those tweets was because she did not like what Jasmine Crockett had to say when she was on CNN about Charlie Kirk. She thought that it was inappropriate, and she wanted to make sure we all knew that she thought it was inappropriate. Jasmine Crockett, while on CNN, said, "It hurts my heart that only 2 Caucasians voted against honoring Charlie Kirk." Laura Loomer takes that soundbite and she quotes, says the following: "It hurts my heart that we have a ghetto Black bitch who hates America serving in Congress." This is Laura Loomer's tweet about Jasmine Crockett. "It hurts my heart that we have ghetto Black bitches, who hate America serving in Congress." She didn't stop there. She then went on to tweet, "Jasmine Crockett's homeboys and homegirls are big mad I called her what she is. Ghetto. I guess I finna watch my back. God forbid Shaniqua pops a cap in my ass. You feels me?" Next tweet, all on X, available for anyone to see, formerly known as Twitter. "Why these bitches be trifling? ? Girl, if you finna play with me, you best be ready for the truth. I be spitting on your weave. I can spit mad bars, Jasmine. Baby girl don't like the taste of her own medicine. You feels me?" More. "Let me ask you a question." And she's referring to Kendall Locke. "It's a Black job when I expose your boss for being a racist hood rat who enjoys promoting political violence. I'm asking you this question. If you have tips about Jasmine Crockett and her staff, send them here." Now, I started this entire conversation off saying free speech. You're allowed to say and do whatever your heart desires. But in my what if game, in my what if theology, what if Jasmine Crockett was responding to Laura Loomer in that way? What would happen? Where would the outrage be? What would she be jeopardizing if in fact she said those things? Just in reverse about Laura Loomer. The price of free speech depends on who you are. And right now in this country, it is very clear that if you are marginalized, your speech isn't free and you need to be careful about what you say. And if you are not marginalized, if you are a Laura Loomer or a Charlie Kirk, you can say whatever. You can say whatever. Consequences be damned. And for years, that's unfortunately what Charlie Kirk did. And I hate that he was assassinated. I truly do. I don't think anyone should die that way. And I have to keep saying that because I want you to understand I see his humanity, although he did not see mine. So what do we do? What do we do when our country says to us, we don't matter? When the current administration says to us, hey, just deal with it. What do we do? Look, we can tap out until this thing is over. I'm okay with that. No judgment. Or we can call a thing a thing. and hope that everything goes our way. I'm living in between the two. But I tell you what, I have a visceral reaction to the hypocrisy. A visceral reaction to the name calling, the blatant ignoring of what is happening, the censorship of journalists and regular citizens, the look the other way because this isn't really happening type of attitude from people who I thought were leaders. The approach to this is, we can't say anything bad about Charlie Kirk because he's passed away, and that's that old theory that you can't talk bad about the dead, but you can remind people what the dead did say. This is the same man who said he didn't think Martin Luther King Jr. was an honorable man and he doesn't deserve a holiday.
I can say declaratively, this guy is not worthy of a national holiday. He is not worthy of godlike status. In fact, I think it's really harmful.
Martin Luther King Jr. lived his life for all people. Nonviolence. Let's come together. I have a dream. Black and white can be together. He wasn't an honorable man? How? How? You gotta say the uncomfortable parts out loud. You don't have to fight everyone, but this is what I will say. Anyone with a platform who feels the need to talk about this, sometimes we just have to say the uncomfortable parts out loud and deal with whatever those repercussions are. This is uncomfortable times. We are living in uncomfortable times. We really, truly are. I wish I could look the other way and pretend like this isn't happening. But I know what happens if we don't say anything. I know what we're in store for if we don't acknowledge it. President Trump hasn't been in office 1 year, y'all. Ain't even been a year. And here we are. In the midst of chaos, hatred, polarizing rhetoric, hateful speech. I don't see this changing. In fact, I see it getting more extreme. And the idea is to make us scared. It's to make us be afraid. It's to make us not talk. We're supposed to look the other way and hope that it all goes away. And as a Black woman on television speaking about these things with a forward-facing platform, I understand the stakes are higher for me. And what I mean by that is just speaking truth and repeating what other people have already said, literally out of their own words. It means that someone's going to say, oh, there she goes again, being difficult, problematic, they're complaining. What? I've been sitting here minding my business. Jasmine Crockett was asked to go on CNN. They asked for her opinion, She gave her opinion because free speech should be free. And now she's being called ghetto. What? Make it make sense. She is an educated woman who has a perfect resume, who deserves to be here. She's fighting for the people, but now she's ghetto because she doesn't look like you and or talk like you. What does this mean? What does that mean? It's unfair and it's unfortunate. And I have tried to not say anything. I've tried to walk the line. I've tried to put my head down and be quiet because I know the stakes are higher for me talking about this, but it just isn't fair. It just isn't fair. And with that being said, because it's been a lot in the news today, I'll end here. I don't know where we are in terms of how to describe what's going on in this country. I don't know how to describe the feeling that I get when I am walking in the airport and I feel someone giving me a dirty stare. Maybe they saw me on CNN. Maybe they didn't like what I said. I don't like the feeling of looking at someone who is not Black or brown and thinking twice about, should I walk up next to them? What's going to happen? Are they going to be hateful? Will they say something to me? Like, these things are on my mind right now. And that is the whole plan, to get us to turn on one another. And I just want common sense to prevail. The same way that Black people are not a monolith, I know that white people are not a monolith. I'm not here saying all white people are bad. Be careful. What I can say is that we have to say the uncomfortable thing. We just do. I know you all have heard the pastor who, to me, gave an eloquent speech. He described, at least from my perspective, what we were dealing with and how we should talk about Charlie Kirk. And he said the truth, in my opinion. Take a listen.
Charlie Kirk did not deserve to be assassinated. But I'm overwhelmed seeing the flags of the United States of America at half-staff calling this nation to honor and venerate a man who was an unapologetic racist and spent all of his life sowing seeds of division and hate into this land.
And I'm going to round out this podcast by talking about Kamala Harris, speaking about somebody who had to deal with an uncomfortable truth. Her book is out, and she is really making a lot of people uncomfortable with her truth. And, you know, I don't know how we'll feel about the book and or this period of time in our lives 10, 20 years from now. Time always tells our story. It gives you perspective. It helps you see things differently. I know that I mentioned Martin Luther King Jr. It was controversial to like Martin Luther King Jr. My grandmother would tell me those stories back in the day. He was considered a problem. People thought he was riling up the good Blacks. He was stirring up trouble with the good Blacks and making them feel like they should be fighting for more. It was controversial to support. That's not a lie. It was controversial to support Martin Luther King Jr. Time will always tell the story. It just will. And so what we're dealing with today will look a whole lot differently 40 years from now. I can't tell you because I won't be around. Heaven forbid, 40 years from now, man. You try. Maybe, shit. My family lives forever. You never know. I might. I'll tell you 40 years from now. Tune in. Side note. Kamala Harris's book, 107 Days. It's a political memoir by Kamala Harris, the 49th Vice President of the United States. And she basically details what happened during her 2024 presidential campaign after Joe Biden's withdrawal from the election. And that title obviously represents the length of her campaign, 107 days. You guys go out and get this book. The contents have made people really uncomfortable. And people are blaming her for speaking her truth, and some people are applauding her for speaking her truth. Take a listen to former Vice President on The View.
The book is about a reflection. And that day in that interview, for me, really was symbolic of the issue. It did not create the issue, but it was symbolic of the issue, which is that I'm a loyal person. And I didn't fully appreciate how much people wanted to know there was a difference between me and President Biden.
I'm going to just say this. The first few times that I heard what Kamala Harris was saying in her book or writing in her book, because I haven't read the book, but the first few times, I'm going to be honest, when she shared how people really felt about her running for the president of the United States, how she really didn't have the support that she thought she was supposed to have. She also talked about how Joe Biden's team, perhaps Joe as well, felt like her shining would take away from him. And so instead of thinking they could work together, I'm paraphrasing, they pretty much siloed or iced her out. And she wasn't, as we saw, really a part of that administration. She really wasn't vocal. She really was always, it seemed to me, hidden. And then when she was asked to talk about Joe, it felt not authentic, at least to me. That's what I felt. And so now she's telling all of these, not necessarily dirty little secrets, but she's telling us the truth, her truth. And I kind of figure why. I'm like, why? Why now? I'm going to be honest. Why now? Does it help or harm the party? Does it put you in a different light? Why do we need to know that right now? She's already said she's not, at least in the near future, running for president. She talked about how betrayed she felt, right? Understandably so. I understand that pain. She said she hadn't mourned the day after the election. She hadn't mourned like that since her mother passed away. It was a different type of mourning for her. All of that I understand, because I mourn too. But I don't understand why, Kamala. Why now? And I'm not speaking against you at all. I'm not speaking against Kamala Harris at all. I just don't understand why now. What is the point? Question's been asked. I don't necessarily know if I've heard an answer that makes me understand. And I'm not sure that I will ever really, truly understand. And I could have a different take on this 6 months from now, 10 years from now. Give it time, as everyone says. And I'm definitely going to read the book because I want to know the dirty details. But no one said politics was easy. Politics is a dirty, dirty game. Everyone knows that. But I'll tell you what, I don't see the point of it. Why now, Kamala? What does this accomplish? Outside of you feeling better, cathartic, I don't know. You want the world to know that politics is ugly and that there was infighting within the party and that people tried to undermine you and that it was really hard because as a Black woman, you probably were not taken as seriously because you were so good and they felt like you were a threat. I know that story. I do. All of us do. And I know I may sound like I don't have any compassion for her, but I don't know why now. That's the thing with the Democratic Party. It's like, it's wild. Right now, we should be looking for a superstar. Right now, we should be, and there's not one superstar, we should be having several superstars. We should be aligning and be in lockstep. That's what your book is essentially saying. They didn't have your back, and we should be, we being that Democratic Party, I'm not a Democrat, but they should be, let me clear that up. They should be looking for someone to take over, or several bodies of people to take over and help and unify. And it should be a united party. Her book to me, and I haven't read it, so again, I'm going to keep saying it. Her book to me, I don't know if it's helping or harming the Democratic Party. I'll come back with my opinions after I finish it. I ask you all, anyone who's read it, tell me. And I'm not being mean, I'm not being rude, I'm just giving you my opinion. You know what? I gotta say the quiet parts out loud. It doesn't help us. It doesn't when we pretend and look the other way. Free speech ain't free. But somebody got to do it. Clearly, this episode was all about politics. This is when we intersect. But today, there's so much going on in the world. And I fear for people who do what I do for a living. I fear that most of us will ultimately have to go to private platforms to continue to be journalists, at least during this season in America. Most of us will have to be independent contractors in order for us to speak truth to power. Most of us will stay in certain positions and walk a fine line. And that fine line during these dangerous times will define us, not for the better. In short, I'm saying, yes, I know if you have a job and you work 9 to 5 and you got a huge platform and they want you to walk the middle, and you happen to be a black person or a brown person, regardless of gender, the stakes are just higher for you. They really are. And it's going to be difficult, and you're going to have to make a choice. The choice could be, I'm going to walk the middle. I'm going to straight and narrow. I'm going to ignore this. I'm going to put my head down, or I'm going all in and see what happens. These are all personal decisions. I am not judging any one of your choices, but what I am saying is that we are living in times that are so dangerous that we cannot ignore what is happening. And if we do decide to ignore what is happening and we look up and find ourselves in an untenable position, meaning we can't get back to where we were, it's going to be all of our faults. Your activism doesn't have to look like my activism. I say that all the time. You don't have to use your platform the way I use my platform. But you can't keep ignoring what's happening. You just have to be aware. Whether you talk about it in your mind, in the quiet recesses of your mind, with your family members, where it could stay in your house, you just have to do it. You can't pretend what's happening is not happening. You can't watch movies and be like, I'm going to bed. I'll wake up in the morning and see if it's better. Dangerous times, dangerous times. This is not exaggeration. Dangerous times. Hasn't even been a full year since he's been president. Dangerous times. Free speech has never been free. Free speech has never been free. Political violence is nothing new to this country. It's happened all the time. We've seen it globally. Political violence is a thing. The fact that it's at our front door, so be it. But we can't pick and choose who the heroes are when it's political violence to your liking. You can't do it. Can't act like it's never happened. It's happened. It continues to happen. And it's disgustingly sad. It is horrific. It always has been. It's never not been. But we have to be able to separate the two, meaning, listen, I have to talk about what this was. It's sad that this was the end result, but this is what it was. We can't revise history, even though they want us to do that. We cannot. I don't know. I am feeling away. And I don't always feel away. But my hope is that whomever may be listening to this may be feeling a little more emboldened, and whatever that looks like for you. But please know that these are not normal times. None of this is normal. Thank y'all for listening. Be back next week.